Like to welcome to the process of hip hop, all the way from the ATL, Georgia, my man Amond Jackson. What's going on, player?
What's happening, man?
Hey,
It's good.
man.
It's good to talk with you, man.
Hey. It's we finally got a chance to hook up, man. I've been trying to get at Amond, man. He's a busy man, and that's what really I want to definitely want to focus in on this episode. Amond is a mixer, engineer, amongst other things, and it's such a this is the process of hip hop. One of the things I think that gets not just underrated, but also undervalued and forgotten about is the mixing and engineering process. Talk
Yeah,
to
that's
me a
for
little
sure.
bit about, man, what is, I wanted to, this is the question I want to ask you. The biggest misconception when it comes to mixing and engineering from the hip hop community, what's the biggest misconception?
That it's not necessary. That it's optional. I guess. Um, Mixing is. I mean, everybody plays a role inside of a record. You know what I'm saying? And mixing is one of those irreplaceable things. Mixing is literally, especially in today's music, like if you don't have professional mixing, it's kind of like so much leans on that. You know what I'm saying? Professional engineering in general, whether it's recording, mixing, mastering, so much leans on that because you're running tons of software. It's not like when you used to perform and you did 45-minute, like performances on stage, and every
Yeah.
note was, you put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of man hours into like making sure that every note was hit properly. It's not that kind of day and time. So mixing is one of those things where um, we are 100% a servant of the music. We don't go into the situation about our ego. We're not looking to be on stage. We're not looking to have clout. We literally just we love sound and we just manipulate sound and we make records feel and sound better. So whatever the artist's idea was or the songwriter's idea or the producer's idea was, we enhance it and make it sound better and feel better and closer in alignment to what they intended the original emotion or song to be, if that makes sense.
Does the producer obviously is an integral part of that process as well? How
Mm-hmm.
much does the mixer and the engineer have? I want to say not final say, but here's how it's going to sound. Does the producer have any input into that in terms of? I know I saw a reel, man, that you had talked about putting the vocals in,
Mm-hmm.
and like how much say does the producer have, or is that just completely all on the mixer engineer?
So I kind of like to think about these kind of things like the producer creates the vibe, the artist then takes that vibe and does something with it, and together now there's a whole new vibe, right? Because they've kind of worked together to birth a baby. And then it comes to someone like me, and I have a philosophy that I don't like. For me, I listen to the music and let the music tell me what it wants instead of trying to dictate what the music is supposed to be. I think that every single song is its own universe, and you don't tell songs what to be. You just listen. You know what I'm saying? Like if
Right.
you if you listen to the music, it's gonna tell you what it is. It's gonna tell you what it needs. It's gonna tell you how it feels. It's gonna tell you the message it's trying to convey. And if you listen to the music, it's gonna guide you into what you should be doing to accommodate it being kind of birthed into the world. If that makes sense. So yeah, so that everybody has a role. The producer and the artists and songwriters and so forth, they're creating all of the vibe. So I think they have the biggest role in things. I think the engineer becomes the conduit for how focused and refined what it is that they've created comes across to the rest of the world.
And in terms of formal training, did you were you formally trained? Was it something you picked up on your own? How did you arrive because for those that don't know, I mean, it would be easier to comprise a list of who you haven't worked with directly or indirectly than the ones that you have worked with. It really would be. So it's like,
Appreciate it.
how your resume, man, is impressive. How do you get to the level where you are actually a mixer and engineer for, again, we're talking about A-list hip hop acts? How do you even get to that? Are you formally trained, self-taught?
Yeah, I'm 100% self-taught, man. Um, I produced music when I first got started. Um, and in as a producer, you learn a lot about technology and troubleshooting and all this other kind of stuff. And so I thought that I was in love with producing. And what I learned over time is that I was in love with sound and not producing. So instead of me running around the world trying to spend 80% of my time trying to find sounds or create new sounds, now the top producers in the world spend 80% of their time making the best sounds that they can to provide to me to then enhance them. It's a better way of living in terms of being in alignment with what works for me and what makes me feel good and where I feel spiritually connected to, emotionally connected to, mentally connected to. So yeah, I learned on my own, man. Like not to say that I didn't have some people in my life who taught me things. That would be ludicrous. I definitely have. But in terms of formal education, no, I don't have a formal education. And the irony of it is, after many years of very, very hard work, at this point now I speak at schools and universities, and these folks pay me to come out and educate their kids that are getting degrees in the thing I never went to school for. So there's a benefit to going to school for it. Um, it does accelerate certain parts of your learning. It introduces you to relationships that you may not have had. Um, for me though, I did all that like in the street, like
Yeah.
all the networking and all the relationships and anything I needed to learn. I just found a way to learn it. Like I took trash jobs, whatever it took to be in proximity to music, and I just stayed on top of it, and I still do to this day. So there's really no right path. It's just dedication to the path is really the thing, not which path you take.
And I
So
think that's interesting what you just said in terms of doing whatever it takes. I mean, if you are passionate about your craft, so whether it be the engineer, the producer, the artist, I don't know if people are always willing to do what it takes in order to learn, in order to get those man hours, because there's nothing you can do to simulate actually working on something and actually
facts.
getting that mastery in a craft. I mean, you can read all the books you want, but you actually have to doing it is something second to none. So how much time it takes, I don't know if people are always willing to do what it takes. And the other part is that also how long that it might take. There's sometimes an indefinite amount of time. I mean, we're talking about sometimes years. I mean, and I'm talking about artists, producers, engineers. I remember reading an article, man, about 10 years ago about Guru, who worked
Hmm.
on, Fade to Black, and how it's like, he was talking about the all the time that he spent, working, and then actually, you get established, and then it's like they actually started, kind of when you're talking about the university and speaking at college, they actually started having majors in engineering and mixing, whereas our generation, that
Right.
wasn't really available at
Not
the
at all.
at major universities, but because the need for it and for formally learning, and I'm sure there's theory and everything behind everything you're talking about.
Well,
But
Ninth Wonder is teaching at universities. Like,
yeah,
like I'm like, it's Ninth Wonder though.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Which is
exactly.
super cool. And that kind of stuff was not happening. The world did not see value in what we did. It didn't
No,
matter how much dope music because our music was considered um we were thieving, like we were robbing other people's creative works. That's kind of
yeah,
the way it was viewed for many, many years. So it wasn't considered an art form until the world kind of saw noticed the artistry in it, and how
right.
you got people like Diamond D that's taking you know, 5 different pieces of vinyl to create one song. To take a kick drum from this one and a snare drum from this one and a, you know what I'm saying, a half a sample from this one and a half a sample from that one, and then like combining it all, and then all of a sudden you've got this record. Like it's extremely artful, and
Yeah.
it comes out of the lack of having some of the professional tools that other musicians had, the professional training that other musicians had. um, Mom and dad couldn't afford to, send you to saxophone class
Yeah.
for 12
Right.
years. You know, what
Hmm.
you had was a turntable and a couple speakers. You can plug it in at the park. You know what I'm saying? And you could, you spin some wax. Kind of, I love hip hop, man. I love all kinds of music, but hip hop is always going to be my favorite, my
Yeah,
favorite music.
absolutely, no doubt. The interesting thing also, I think, to what you said is, with 25th anniversary of All Eyes on Me, I remember there's an actual YouTube video, the engineer for All Eyes on Me talking about how important it was to Dre to be able to record All Eyes on Me in the studio with the engineers that were top tier and the mics that were also top tier, and how what a difference that made in the sound and the quality of the album. And I said, it was the first time I thought to myself, was like, well, wait a minute. So, but the tracks, it's a Dre track, so it was dope, right? But it was like, yeah, but he needed that team and that
Right.
equipment in order to make a masterpiece. So it was
Yep.
like a lot of, the Chronic, All Eyes on Me, was like, yeah, they were dope, but it was also the technical aspect of it, and the people working the finishing product is really what made those albums, ridiculous. And most people don't even realize that.
Oh, there's a soul. The thing about Dre is he has an uncompromising ear. Um, and the folks I know that work with him have on occasion contrasted my attitude toward music because I'm so picky.
Yeah.
I don't even want to say picky, but deliberate. You know what I'm saying? Like if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. If it doesn't sound right, it doesn't sound right. Um, and Dre is one of those people that makes me feel good about being that type of person.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like there's somebody I can point to that makes me feel less weird for being that way. And that's because the dude, like, there are things that I do with an EQ that don't even make sense to people with Grammys. And it's not because I'm special, it's just because I invested my time differently.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I didn't care if I chose the right snare. I cared if the snare that was chosen was enhanced to the greatest of its ability. It's different. Once I exited being a producer, like engineering, I love engineering, man. This thing
Yeah.
is incredible. So, like, still to this day, I play 2001. If I go into a room that I'm not familiar with, sonically, it's not treated in a way that I have a very peculiar ear. So if it's something in that room that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, and I'm trying to kind of analyze and adapt to the way that room sounds so that I can work, I'll play 2001 every time. You know what I'm saying? Because
Just
it's
it's almost like, let's just see what it sounds like with off of, yeah, off of this album. If it
yep.
sounds good with this album, then yeah, that makes sense.
Well,
It
it's like you're so familiar with the songs that it's like it causes you to understand nuances. Like, oh, 7K sounds a little louder in here than it should, only because you're used to listening to that. You need a bass line,
yeah,
basically. You know what I mean? So that album serves as a baseline for a lot of the things that, like, when I'm kind of moving around and working in different spaces, I listen to that a lot. So I think you're exactly right. Dre's incredible. I'm glad he's still here. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
definite icon, man. And the your latest, or what you've been working on recently, man. Talk to me about it a little bit with Two Chains. Talk to me about what you've actually been working on, like super recently, like as of today, I believe.
Um Okay, so in the last, I did this post that was talking about this the other day, which is really weird. So in the last 7 days, well, not today. As of if we went back to Wednesday, within 7 days of Wednesday of
Yeah.
this week, um, I I started my week by going to a Quali video shoot, a Talib Quali video shoot with Diamond D and Quali got an album called Gotham that's coming up.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
mixed five or
sir.
six joints. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mixed 5 or 6 joints on that album. So they had a video shoot for one of the songs, which features Sky Zoo. All right. So I just finished Sky Zoo's album, which is amazing. It's called All the Brilliant Things. Um, I just finished mixing that album, and the masters came back to. I think Sky's getting the masters back today. So, anyways, so I went to this video shoot, and Stolly showed up, and Big Crit showed up, and Rock, and Dylan Maurer, and it was a host of like incredible people that I hadn't seen in a while because of COVID. So that's how my week kind of started on Wednesday. But on Wednesday afternoon, I also got a call about recording. Two Chains engineer called me about doing live sound to record Tiny Desk, and I think you're familiar with Tiny Desk,
Yeah.
but Tiny Desk is like a super like secret society. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can't. Not everybody gets in a Tiny Desk, so I was extremely geeked out that that Two Chains was doing a Tiny Desk, let alone asking to be involved. So I hit my homie Deacon. We went out there with Willie Will, and we recorded the Tiny Desk in Two Chains nail salon, right? Which was nuts. It's like him and a full band, like in his nail salon.
In a nail salon.
So we tracked that. That dropped on this Wednesday, 2 days ago. So that's happening. I'm mixing a record that's featuring Method Man. I'm mixing a record that's featuring Cool Keith.
Mm.
Um, I'm mixing a record that's featuring Greg Nice, and that's I think that's it for this week. But
You think?
bro, it's nuts. But
You might be leaving something out, huh?
it's so mind blowing to be able to mix a two. Okay, so we recorded the concert. I'm sorry, and I mixed the concert also, the Two Chains concert. So it's really crazy to be doing like Method Man and Two Chains in the same week. When I did Futures, I did a song that Future was featured on a few years ago or a couple years ago, and I did like a quality record. It was either a quality record or a Pharoah Monch record in the same week I was doing the Future record, which was hella weird too. Like, it's not weird to me, but like when you step back and look at it, that's like not normal. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it's a blessing, man. I love that I can operate in both worlds and make each, like if I'm working on trap music, I'm enhancing trap music, and it sounds like I've been mixing trap music my whole life. And if I'm working on, like a Sean Price song or something, it's going to sound like I've been working on that music my whole life, which I actually have. So um, I love it, man.
Do you
We talk
feel
about this
like
all day.
because of your production background, do you feel that that gives you an advantage of being able to work within different subgenres of hip hop?
Yeah, I DJ'd, I produced, I did radio. I've done a lot of stuff, like full on. You know what I mean? Like full on. And I think all those things come into play. I think when you spin records, it helps you to understand timing and pocket. Same thing with producing. You know what I'm saying? Like especially if you produce, if you've ever DJ'd, it really really, and the greats will tell you. Pete Rock will tell you. Jay Dilla would have told you. Like a lot of folks who Diamond D would tell you, like if you spin records, it's just something about that process that teaches you about music in a different way. And it humbles you and causes, because when you're DJing, you're a servant of the music. You know what I'm saying? You're not creating the music, you're a servant of the music. And so I think that helps you to learn, accelerate your learning in some other areas that you wouldn't necessarily. You're going to pay attention to bass lines and the timing of when a vocal comes in, and the pocket, and how the mood affects other people that are listening, so that you can kind of guide the room through a vibe and take them on a journey when you're DJing. So that matters. And I think as a producer, being a producer definitely is the number one thing that helped me with engineering, because being a producer helped me to understand the perspective of producers and what it is that their goal is when they're trying to. So some folks call me the producer whisperer. um
Yeah.
I really understand, like, when somebody sends me a record, it is extremely rare for me to like work on an instrumental and the producer to not be happy with it. And it's extremely common for an engineer to work on a producer's beat and for the producer to not like it. That's very rare for me, and it's only, I think, I want to say that that's because I really understand where producers are coming from and what they're looking for, and what they think they're looking for, that they're not actually looking for. And that happens a lot.
And the amount of different producers that you've worked with, I think that gives you've worked with enough to understand, well, this worked for these set of producers, this worked for this set of producers. So you almost have you almost are able to calibrate, like, okay, based off of these experiences, this worked for this. I think obviously I would think the process becomes a little bit easier. And that leads me to my next question. Because you've been doing this for so long, man, what have been, and you have your producer DJ background, what have been the changes that you've seen in hip hop over, again, if the golden era was the 90s and we're now in 2021?
Wow.
Yeah, I just opened up that can of worms for you, man. What has been the changes that you've seen in terms of artistry and production?
All right, so I'm gonna say something that's not gonna get the popular vote and shit, right? Um, I don't think I yes, I know that it's changed, but hip hop, okay, there were materialistic, like, oriented things in hip hop when I was a kid.
Yeah,
And so now, if you listen to Migos and you listen to, like, Ross, or you listen to, like, what's the difference?
right,
What is the difference? Like, we was wearing big giant chains when I
right.
was little. We're
Yep,
wearing big giant chains now, right? And so I don't feel, because the chains change into watches and cars, I don't feel like that's really different. I feel the thing that is predominantly different is the amount of time invested in, two things: the amount of time invested into your skill set. It is so much easier now to create records that will generate income without having to dedicate for me, during my generation, when I was coming up, it was either you dedicated your life to it or you didn't find success. That's just what it was. um so I think that's one of the biggest differences, is that it's so much more accessible to people, that your investment can be much smaller and you can get a bigger return. um the other side of it is, I think that people don't find the value in being different the way that it was earlier. I've seen that change over the years. It's okay for people to have the same name with a small variation, and that wasn't so okay back then. In the 90s, in the 80s, the 90s, the late 90s, even still, you would get your ass whooped if someone called themselves Lil something and somebody else called themselves Lil something. Somebody's getting their ass whooped.
right.
It's kind of what it was. If you
Mm,
named a song the same thing that somebody else named the song, beef, right?
yeah,
And so there was definitely a general pride about being different and unique, and having a cadence or a flow that was different, or a production style that was different, or any of those kind of elements. And those are things I really genuinely miss about the way that I was raised in music versus the way things are now. But fortunately, I have the ability to influence that. So even as an engineer, I can interject things that like ideas and stuff into records because of my strong relationships with the artists. They trust me with that kind of stuff. So we experiment a lot more and do, But once again, it's you can't take away from the fact there were educators. There were a lot of educators, when we were coming up. So you got, you know, KRS-One and X Clan, and it's like the list goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Sadat X and Brand Nubian, and but now you have people like J. Cole and Kendrick that, despite the climate that they operate in, still find ways to educate. And so I don't want to just fall into this really lazy, judgmental space of saying y'all aren't creative and y'all don't. I don't really believe that. I think that things have changed, but I think the creativity still exists. Um, the individuality could use a facelift, like what I'm saying, a bump. But outside of that, man, the education could use the cooperativeness could use a bump up. Um, but I feel like we're still dealing with the same thing that we've always been dealing with, which is the commercialization of an art form that we love.
Yeah, and it's interesting also because you have your millennials, I'll just say. You have a generation of people who only knew hip hop to be this super popular, I mean, the most popular genre in the world.
Right.
Whereas again, our generation, it was, this is going to be a fad. This isn't even going to be around. So
Right.
it's like I always think that that makes a difference too. When you're walking in a room, figuratively speaking, and hip hop is already this established, huge, mega moneymaker, I
Right.
think your approach is different. So, you know, you know, the way Rakim, the way that Cool G Rap, the way that that they were viewing hip hop is way different from an artist that's coming out right now or the last couple of years. I mean, it's just the perspective, because I mean, they have the benefit of, they already know that hip hop is versus they didn't know in the 80s, 70s. They were just, they were just doing it. You
Right.
were, and then didn't want to, and obviously at a certain point in time didn't even want to actually have it go commercial. So
Right.
um definitely, different dynamics. So I mean, you don't really have a what. My next question, man, is what's next. But I mean, there's never I feel like there's never a what's next for you, because there's never nothing that stops. But I mean, what I'll still ask it. What's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Man, I go where my heart tells me to go. Um, so at this point, man, I never know what's gonna happen, man. To be honest with you, you know what I'm saying. I didn't expect to get that Two Chains call Wednesday. I don't. I found out Stolly lived like 15 minutes from me. I don't know. I'm not gonna get a call from him, and we wind up working together again. Everything is just kind of. I don't do a whole bunch of advertising about what I do. We just have good. I don't know what Diamond D's gonna bring through here. Like I don't know what.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's so crazy, man. Like there are so many amazing folks that I've had the opportunity to work with that it really is it for me. I'm in a space where there are so few folks that I haven't worked with that I really like deep down, like in here really like I didn't get to work with Doom before Doom passed. That was a
Yeah.
thing for me. That was hard. Like not just because it was Doom passing, but also because I'm like, damn, we didn't get the opportunity. You
Right.
know, um, I didn't get to work with Sean Price before he passed, and then I don't remember how many years later, but last year I got a phone call from Shroom, who's a producer from the Netherlands, and he had a 20-year-old recording of Sean Price that
Uh,
wasn't released, that I wound up mixing the record, and it's a remix version of the record that was released this year. So at some point later in the year, they'll release the remix, and that's the one I mixed. So you never know, man. I didn't get to work with Jay Dilla, but like I work with his family. Um, I don't know what's going to happen with that. Like you just don't.
Yeah,
You literally just don't know.
you don't
I
know.
wanted to work with Madlib, and I thought that wasn't necessarily going to happen, and that's happening. So I, bruh, I want to work with her. I want to work with
Ah,
I want to work with Anderson Pack. There's
yeah.
a few folks, and they, like Anderson Pack works with one of my OGs. You just don't, bro. All I know is I'm here for whatever happens next.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
grateful. God got me in the right place at the right time. The energy's flowing, and I have an open spirit to whatever is next for me. I know I'm going to get into education heavier. Um, and yeah, I'm going to get into education heavier, and we'll see. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to see what happens. Man, I'm so grateful, bro. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't
man,
even know.
again, if you're listening, you got to check my man out. And speaking of which, man, what's the best way for people to keep in contact with what you're doing, man?
I'm a Mon Jackson on everything. So, Instagram, uh, Facebook. I don't rock with Facebook, but any Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, anything that exists, even the website's Amon Jackson. So
Yeah.
just reach out, Amon Jackson, and I am around, and I am present, and I'm down for it. You know what I'm saying? As long as it's good music and it's forward momentum oriented, I'm down, man.
Oh, man, Amon
That's
Jackson,
it.
man, thank you so much. We're gonna be back with Amon, by the way, if you're listening. I'm already gonna try to get this brother back, man. We got other things to talk about, man. But appreciate you, man, joining the episode for this episode, man, and much luck to you in 2021. Like I said, we'll be back part two with my man.
I appreciate you, man. It's an honor, man.